thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending your evening with us. My name is Paola Vasignana. I'm currently serving as president of the UCSB Chicano Latino Alumni Network. So to share a little bit about our group, we are a volunteer group that has had many iterations, but really gelled together in 2018 and have started putting together programming focused towards professional development for alumni, hoping to be able to create a bridge between students and alumni. We're a volunteer group, so we're not formally affiliated with the university quite yet, but we do work in partnership and in support with the UCSB Alumni Association. So I do want to recognize Julie Mickleberry, the programs director, who's been working with us. And then on tech tonight, we have Carmia Baskin, who's the assistant programs director, who will be helping us with the tech and helping moderate the chat. So we appreciate her time and participation today. I'm also going to introduce some of the other board members that we have here today. So please give a wave and a smile when I mention your name. First, we have Gabriela Sid. She is class of 13 and serves as our vice president. We have Sonia Salazar, class of 2009, and Ursula Celeste Aguiar, class of 2010, that are co-directors of recruitment and engagement. And we have Epifanio Epi Peinado, class of 83, who is our Generaciones liaison to help create connections across generations. So as you might have seen in the event info, this is our introductory workshop. We're planning on having a series focused on finances. At the end of the event, Gabby will give you a little bit more of an overview of what the next few look like. But I did want to take a moment to introduce our special guest tonight. Your presenter for tonight is Yaslin Alonso. She is a certified financial educator and financial coach, a proud UC alumna, Mexican-American first-generation college graduate who received her master's in education and student affairs from UCLA in 2020 and bachelor's of ethnic studies in Spanish from UC Riverside in 2017. Since 2019, she's been on a financial wellness journey that she's going to share with you more about tonight as part of this presentation. So thank you, Yaslin, a fellow UC grad, to be here with us, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Paola, for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend this workshop. I have, I would say, a really fun presentation. It's one of my favorite presentations to give. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get started. All right. Can everyone see the screen? Perfect.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So I promised to get everyone out of here by 7 o'clock. We do have an interactive piece, a few discussion questions. So I do encourage you all, if you're willing to comment in the chat box, but let's go ahead and get started. So just to further elaborate on my bio and where I come from, as Paola mentioned, I started on this financial wellness journey back in 2019, and that was the same year that I started my graduate program. So my background is in education, and the reason why I wanted to work in this field is because I was very fortunate to have really great mentors throughout my undergraduate career. Being first gen, trying to navigate that system, I wanted to be that person for future college students. And so when I enter my graduate program, I will say I had no intention of doing financial wellness work. That was by accident. I went in there wanting to do something completely different, but the way my graduate program was structured was that we were all, the people in the program, we were all assigned an internship site, and my site happened to be UCLA's financial wellness program. So I was very fortunate to work there for 2 years. And that time, yes, I did work with undergraduate and graduate students, but the thing that I took the most out of this experience was how empowering it was to learn about my own personal finances. And ever since then, I've enjoyed it. And so I currently manage UCR's financial wellness program. But, since 2019, I've really honed down on my budgeting method. I thought I was really good at having a budget until I realized, no, I was always just mentally, I would eyeball it and think to myself, oh, I think I'm good for the month. And it wasn't until I sat down with my supervisor and she helped me create that budget. She's like, no, you're going over budget. So that was kind of the turning point, like, okay, I really need to get it together. And also because I'm a parent. So I have 2 children and just trying to get the finances in order. That's really what triggered it. But I also have saved enough money to be able to pay off 2 loans. I'm still waiting to see what the Biden administration plans to do. But if it does come to it, I've these past 2 years, I've been able to save up that much. But most of all, too, I started investing. And I'll talk more about this. But I grew up in a family where money wasn't something that was discussed at the dinner table. And I honestly don't think I would have invested if it wasn't for that experience. So I've opened a Roth IRA. I've been able to max out my contributions for the past 2 years. And I also started I opened a 529 plan for both of my kids. So I'm very passionate about providing holistic and quality financial education to anyone that's willing to talk about money. And in my free time, I really enjoy reading fiction books and baking cookies with my kids, and also working out at the gym. So just a little bit about who I am. So today's workshop outcomes, I hope that you all take something new and share it with your community, but I have 3 outcomes that hopefully all of you take out from this presentation. Number 1 is to understand how our cultura, familia, and external factors influence our relationship to money. That's really what we're going to talk about today. Towards the end, we'll talk about how you can create a budget that fits your lifestyle and also pay down debt. And then lastly, we'll end it with recognizing the importance of investing and why we should start early to build generational wealth. A few workshop norms. I do want to say, money is emotional. We all have different challenges and privileges that have led us to where we are financially. So as you're hearing what I'm here to present, really, learn, but also give yourself compassion, right? We're all here to learn something. And so just know that's what we're here to learn something new. As I mentioned, I do have a few discussion questions in the middle of this presentation. So I do encourage participation. You can type in the chat box just to ensure a fruitful and productive discussion. And there will be a Q&A at the end, but if you do have some general questions, you can include that in the chat box. But again, we'll save that for the end. And then I do want to say a financial disclaimer. Everything that I'm about to present to you is for educational purposes only. So I'm a certified financial educator. I'm not a certified financial planner. So please consult with a financial planner regarding your financial situation. All right, so I wanted to start off this presentation now that we've gotten all of the housekeeping out of the way. I really wanted to talk about or start this off with a theory. So familismo, has anyone heard of this concept before? No. Okay, this is actually really great. So as I mentioned in my bio, I am an ethnic studies major. And so this was something I really learned in one of my classes. But familismo or familialism in English, it's basically this central core value in the Latinx community. And you also see it in different ethnic groups. But what familismo pretty much at its core says, it places a high emphasis on the family unit and community. So the commitment, the dedication, and loyalty to the family unit. And I see this as an asset. So, having that familial support, especially if you are a first generation college graduate, right, trying to navigate that system, and even in other aspects of your life, like family is important to many of us. And so when it comes to our finances, right, whether it's been stated directly or indirectly, you might have a sense of obligation to help out our families financially, right? I will share. So my parents, they're both immigrants, and I watched them help out their parents. So my paternal grandparents, they lived with us up until their passing, but I would see my parents help them and take care of them. With my maternal grandparents, they lived in Mexico, but my mom and her siblings would send money to them as often as they could. And so to me, I'm the oldest, and it hasn't been stated directly to me, but just because that's what I grew up with, I know at some point I will want to take on that caregiving role. And even just thinking about that, I know that that will impact my finances, right? And so maybe some of you are in that position where you're helping out your families to some extent. But this really relates to what we're going to talk about today, about unpacking our money novelas. So before we dive into that, I wanted to talk about some of the money taboos in the Latinx community. And this, of course, is not extensive, but just a few. So number one, it's taboo to talk about money. I think this is not just relevant to our community, but also to other communities as well. Growing up, my parents didn't discuss money to my siblings and I remember I learned very early on that it was inappropriate and rude to talk about money with others. I actually remember this conversation with my sister. She had told me how with her partner, they were discussing their finances. And I remember being completely shocked. I'm like, you talk about money with your partner? And she just looked at me like, of course, like that's how I'm going to have this communication. But to me, it was something foreign because our parents didn't do that. Another thing too, right? And I don't know if this was all of your experience at some point, it might be similar, but for me, at least, it was inappropriate as well to tell people how much I spent money on gifts. I still do this to this day where I take out the pricing because I don't want people to know. But I have met people who don't even mind. I'm like, I don't care. And so just that was a taboo, right? And so not having those money conversations can really impact the way we think about it, the attitudes, the beliefs that we currently have, right? The other taboo on here, and it relates to the third taboo, is that it's taboo to take risks financially, right? And also that there's a mistrust in financial institutions. So if you grew up especially in an immigrant household, some of our parents might be more on the conservative side financially, right? Especially if they're home country, they witness a lot of corruption where there's not much trust in the financial institutions. And even now, as they come to this, or as they came into the new country, trying to navigate those different systems, right? And as humans, it's natural to not engage in things that we just don't know. So does this sound familiar to some of you? You can comment in the chat box. Would you agree or disagree with some of the money taboos? Yeah, so I see some agreements. Yeah. And so the reason why we're talking about money taboos is because this goes into our discussion questions. All right, so engaging in our money novelas. Money novelas, what I like to define them as, is a personal narrative of our relationship to money, right? I do want to emphasize that, as we're getting older, our money novelas are always evolving because of the new experiences that we have. But at its core, our money novelas encompasses our personal experiences, our beliefs, and our attitudes that are both conscious and unconscious. So I have 4 questions here today. Again, I really encourage you all to participate just so that we could have a fruitful discussion. But the first question relates to how we were raised. So in the chat box, how was money discussed indirectly or directly growing up? I can start us off by saying, how I had mentioned earlier, my parents didn't discuss money to us, to my siblings and I. I'm the oldest. I have 2 siblings. I don't remember ever that they would sit us down and explicitly tell us, this is how a budget works, or this is how investing works. But I did learn about money in their actions. So one memory that I always remember, my mom, when I was younger, she would sit my sister and I every Saturday afternoon to help her cut coupons. And to me, it was fun. I was 5. I was like, this is exciting. I'm cutting coupons with my mom. So that way on Sunday, she was ready to do her grocery shopping. I'll admit I'm not the best couponer when it comes to grocery shopping, but I do use coupons when I do other shopping. But to me, that taught me like there are ways to be resourceful. There are ways to save money. So that's just one experience that I remember. So I just want to hear from a few of you all. What are some ways that it was discussed indirectly or directly growing up? Were there any money phrases used? What were some of the actions that your parents would do when it came to money? So we have indirectly, overheard in convos. Gabriel said indirectly, I remember frustration when they would be paying bills at the kitchen table. Paula raised her hand.
Oh, I was going to type it, but I remember my parents, when I was little, they would talk about La Semana because they each had like their allowance that they made for themselves to be able to go like buy lunch or something at work.
Yeah. Thank you. Sonia, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think the first memory that comes to mind, and I didn't realize this till I was a little older and away at college, like at the beginning of the month, my parents would pay off the rent. And then those were the times where we were able to like maybe go out and eat on Sunday after church. And then I remember the rest of the month, like my mom would get really creative with like, she would make a olla de frijoles on Monday and then would somehow make dishes for the whole week. But it was like, we were able to go out and eat at least once, or like our meals would have like meat, because meat is expensive. But then the other half of the month, it was like frijoles, like enfrijoladas, or a bowl of frijoles, which is rolled up tortillas. So I think about that now, and it's like, yeah, my parents were struggling always towards the end of the month.
Thank you, Sonia, for sharing. We also have 2 folks in the chat box that said indirectly, parents struggling to pay the bills. Another person said indirectly, emphasis on the cost of things. Yeah, so thank you all for sharing. And this goes into number 2. So you can use the same experience that you shared, or you can use a different memory, but what emotions come to mind as a result of, any positive and or negative financial memories? So for me, the one that I shared, I view that as a positive memory just because I got to spend more time with my mom, but also it just taught me again how to be resourceful, how to find ways to make your money stretch. I actually asked the same question to my sister, and she's the middle child. And interestingly enough, she has the same memory, but different perspective. To her, it was, it made her more anxious when it came to money because it showed her like, oh, we don't have enough money. And so I see her as well, how her own relationship to money is, it's more of a negative mindset. And I get it too, but it was just very interesting to have the same memory, but just a different perspective. Sonia, you raised your hand.
Oh no, I think that was from the previous one.
Oh. Paula, yes.
Just another money memory that I think I guess there's a positive and a negative side is, when my parents would be concerned about financial struggles of their siblings back in Ecuador. So that's one financial memory that the negative side of it is, but I also think that, they felt good in some way, but there was pressure in some other to be able to contribute back home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So Sonia said negative, there was worry and concern, and Raquel also shared my parents being frustrated comes to mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A different memory for me is I was very fortunate to not have to graduate with undergraduate student loan debt, but grad school was a completely different story. And at the time, I remember feeling very anxious. I was very close to using my credit card. That's how much I knew at the time about financial literacy. I was like, nope, I don't want to take out a loan. I would rather pay with a credit card. Thankfully, I had my partner tell me, no, that's a bad idea. Take out the loans because they have lower interest rate. But I remember feeling that panic of the idea of having debt. Looking back now, I am grateful that I had access to that to help fund my master's program. But I think now that I'm a few years out of my program, there is at times, I feel that anger that I had to get myself into debt to attain this degree. I don't know if some of you share that same sentiment, and even then how everything's always changing with the Biden administration, how right now the student loans are on pause and we don't know if they will resume or not. So yes, I have mixed emotions, but that is just a different financial memory that I have. Anyone else willing to share before we move on to the third question? And then just to follow up on some of the folks that did share, so you mentioned the emotions. What were some lessons that you took from that specific financial memory? So Sonia shared, that reminds me of how credit card companies would table at UCSB and get students to sign up for them without explaining that paying $25 a month would not get you to pay off the entire balance. Yes, I think I was too young for that. I never experienced that, but I remember hearing from folks when I worked at UCLA share that too, how when they were in college, the credit card companies would come out and try to persuade college students to take out a credit card without realizing, the fine print. All right, so we're going to move on to number 3. So this relates to the identities that you all hold. And so how do your identities influence how you think or view about money? So I just provided some examples, right? What does it mean to identify as Chicana, Chicano, Latinx? If you are a first generation college graduate, what does that mean? Consider your gender, your sexuality, birth order. Are you in a caregiver role? So again, how do all of these identities, you can pick one or multiple, influence how you think about money? Gabriela, yes.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of interesting how you said siblings view things differently. I'm the oldest, first generation. My parents are undocumented immigrants in Mexico. And me going to school, I could never ask my parents for money because I felt like they didn't have enough. But my siblings, brother and sister, I think my parents managed to give them like thousands of dollars, not like tons of money, right? But they were able to assist them. Whereas with me, there was a guilt to asking them. There was a guilt to taking anything from them. And so I think even in the way that I have attained debt, considering like compared to them, has been very different, because even from my debt lessons, they've managed to learn, right? The younger ones. And so I think that always influences like when, like, if you're the oldest, if you're the youngest or whatever, and how your siblings may perceive money differently than you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I definitely do see that with the folks that I do work with, how especially birth order plays a really important factor. I'm also the oldest, and there's just different responsibilities that are placed on the oldest versus the younger siblings. Anyone else? So Sonia shared, as the oldest child, I worry a lot about money. Will I have enough to care for them? Mm-hmm. I share that same sentiment as well. Raquel shared, first generation growing up, I didn't have someone teaching me anything about financial planning, budgeting, investing, taking out loans for payment, etc. Yes. I definitely share that same sentiment, not really knowing, learning all this jargon too. And I'll talk a little bit more towards the end about investing, but just all of this, like how to navigate these different systems, how to have a budget that fits our lifestyle, right? You just kind of learn it from different, if we weren't fortunate enough to have people sit down with us and teach us this stuff, it can be really difficult because there's just a lot out there, information, and even all of that can be very overwhelming, sorting and deciding, like, does this apply to me? Does it not? Anyone else?
Hi, it's Epi. I'm driving, so pardon me for not putting my hand up. So I do remember as a child, my parents, they operated in the cash economy, meaning my dad did get paid by way of a check, but we cashed our check at our local grocery store, and paid off the IOUs and all that good stuff. So money and me, were an unfamiliar terms. In fact, I didn't get a checking account and didn't know about a checking account until I went off to college. So the last thing I'll say about my relationship with money is that I always felt that we were pretty much working poor. And I always felt that my dad was the bread earner in our family, even though my mom worked twice as hard, right? Taking care of 7 boys. But I always felt that my parents were more capable, my dad in particular was more capable of earning more money. So that influenced me to make sure that when I got into my career pathway, that I looked for ways to make sure that I moved up within my organization so that I would make more money, to not be in the position that we were in which we relied upon the government to help us obligations and the like. So just for me, but that's in a nutshell my experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I actually like that you brought up the checking accounts. That actually reminded me as well. I also didn't get my own checking or even savings account until I went off to college. But my youngest sibling, he's still in high school, and I think they opened his account early on. And I remember being very shocked. I'm like, what? Mom and dad opened you a checking account? That did not happen for me until I went off to college. But yeah, thank you for sharing. I will say I'll pick a different identity. So I am a mom. I had my oldest when I was my second year in college. And so just thinking back to when I was a college student, I remember feeling very frustrated, and just because not many of my peers were young parents. And so just learning how to, trying to find jobs that was able to provide for my son at the time. I have 2 now, but at the time it was just my oldest. But also trying to succeed in school. So finding that balance with work, being a mom, being a student, all of that felt very overwhelming. But and it's still now to this day where I, try to do the best that I can with my situation and provide for them. So Gabriela shared, same, my brother and sister had theirs under my name as soon as I could open it for them. They're 7 and 9 years younger than me. Is this relating to the accounts?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. And now to the last question is thinking about, what does your current financial situation look like? How does that shape the way you currently view money or your relationship to it? Paula, yes.
Well, I think the pandemic, and I know I've talked with some of my friends about it, really showed us like how we were spending our money, because suddenly we were cloistered inside. I didn't feel as broke as I felt every other week out in the real world. So it made me question how I'm spending my money. And, you know, I feel like because I've taken passion jobs, many of the roles I've been in, I haven't been paid what I thought I should be paid, or let me rephrase that. I wasn't paid what I felt I needed to live the lifestyle that seemed awesome. And now, you know, now that I'm like mid-30s, I'm, I guess, approaching the point that's starting to feel less new career. I'm starting to feel like I have a little bit more comfort with being able to take some of that and do something with it, but I am completely overwhelmed with what to do with it. So that's my current financial situation.
Thank you, Paula, for sharing. And you bring up a good point too about how the pandemic has definitely showed us the inequities. It's always been there, but I think it's highlighted even more, right? I will share too, the pandemic happened when I was in my grad program. So I think when I went in there, I was very excited to work in this profession. And don't get me wrong, there are great things about working in higher ed, but to go to Paula's point, I think now after I graduated, it was very hard to find a job. And it took me actually almost a year to find the current role that I'm in. Thankfully, I did have a part-time job, but I just remember feeling very frustrated, feeling like, was this all worth it? Because I went to grad school to hopefully advance my career, get started, feel financially stable. Do I feel financially stable now? To some degree. I mean, I still live at home with my parents. I'm very fortunate, I'll say that, to even have that. But I think they're just thinking about society. I think there's sometimes this pressure to feel like you have to reach these stages in your life. And so there's that conflict that I have where it's like, well, yes, I have a master's degree. And yes, I thought I have a full-time job with benefits, but at times it doesn't feel like I've achieved much or I'm financially stable. I don't know if that's at some point for folks who were entering their careers, if you felt that way, or maybe you feel this way now. But I'd like to hear from a few folks as well. What does your current financial situation look like? All right. Well, thank you all for engaging in these discussions, for being vulnerable and willing to share. We're going to move on just because I'm looking at the time and I want to ensure that we have time for Q&A and for, I think, Gabriela to share the upcoming announcements. But the next part on here, thinking about your money novelas, right? Let me move if this works. Oops. Now is then to create a money mission statement. So this is really similar to creating a vision board, but really it's related to money. So it's a guide or a blueprint of how you envision your life to look like financially. So I like to break this down into 3 steps. The first one is to start with your why. What values or what do you want the purpose of money to be in your life and why? So some really common ones is stability, right? I think we all want that in our lives, to have that stability. Another common one too is to have money to travel to for freedom, right? Whatever it is, start with your why, get honest with that. And then the second step then is to clarify your financial goals. So thinking about, what your values are, creating short, mid, and long-term goals, right? Getting very specific, having a measurable, that has to be achievable, realistic, and making sure that you have a support system, right? You want to make sure that you can have someone to hold you accountable as you're creating these financial goals. And then the third step too is to write down your money affirmations or gratitudes. I think it's very easy to default and think about our past money mistakes, to feel those negative emotions that we might have towards money. But, think about, what it is that you have now, practice the gratitude and write down the information, because I firmly believe that we all are capable of creating the life that we envision for ourselves. So highly encourage you all, whether it's writing it down on paper, creating a Prezi or a PowerPoint, I actually went that way, whatever it is, highly encourage you all to create that money mission statement so that you can see it and it's clear to you. And that way, that what we're about to talk about next, everything else, the different, the budgeting, the debt management, the investing, it all comes back together to your money mission statement. All right, so these next few slides are a general overview of budgeting, debt management, and investing. But I do know that this group, alumni group, will host future workshops that go more in depth. So right now, I'm just giving you all a general overview. But the first one is, highly encourage you, if you haven't done so, to create a realistic budget. Budgeting gets a bad rep, and I get it, because it could be overwhelming, it could be boring. But I like to think of budgeting as a plan, right? You are telling your money where it's going. And I always say to my clients that you do have agency in this process. And so, some of the common steps in creating a budget is, one, listing all of your income, right? And also listing all of your expenses. That will tell you whether you are over budget or under. But a key thing that's on this slide is to really think about your savings. So I like to encourage you all, if you haven't done so, is to build your emergency fund. So realistically, or not realistically, but the rule of thumb really is to have at least 3 to 6 months saved in your emergency fund. But that number really is dependent on two things. One, your income stability, and two, your number of dependents. And so, for example, if your current monthly expenses are at $3,000, and you're trying to have at least 3 months, so try to have about $9,000. Now, some people that's doable, sometimes it's not, but it's just really breaking it down where it's manageable for you all to, build up your emergency fund in your budget. The other thing on here is to also create sinking funds for any irregular expenses. So sinking funds, they differ from the emergency fund, just because you are saving up for something, but with the idea that you're going to use it for that specific expense. So for example, say, the tax deadline is just around the corner, April 18th, but say in advance that you have to pay taxes. That is something that you can foresee and start planning, making these expenses into fixed small expenses so that it's manageable. So that way, when the time comes, it's not as a surprising thing. And even thinking back to, at some point, if you were in your college career, maybe you had to travel back home, again, taking those expenses into consideration. And lastly on here is to keep your savings in a high yield savings account. So a high yield savings account is really similar to a traditional savings account. It's just, it has a slightly higher interest rate than the traditional sense. So if you were to open a savings account with Chase or Bank of America, I think they're like 0.01%. So you earn pennies, you don't earn that much. But if you were to open one in a high yield savings account, right now the average rate is 0.5%. So you earn, it's not as high, but it's still relatively high than if you were to open one with a traditional savings account. There are many out there, so you can find a really great source that I like to go to is nerdwallet.com. It's a personal financial hub. You can go on there and compare, the different high yield savings accounts out there, and even credit cards, different accounts in general. So highly encourage you to look that up if you don't have this right now. The next section on here is debt management. Again, you will all have a future workshop that goes more in depth about this, but just some starting points now is one, to take inventory of your debt, right? Getting really honest about the kind of debt that you might have, whether it's credit cards, student loans, writing that down. The second step then is to create a debt repayment plan that is sustainable to you. So there are two methods out there: debt snowball and debt avalanche. The snowball method, this is where you pay debt starting from your smallest and building up to your largest balance. So this is really great, to feel like you're having those small victories. Debt avalanche, on the other hand, it focuses more on paying down debt with the highest interest rate, and then you move on, right? So the debt avalanche makes sense mathematically, but again, pick the one that you feel you will stick to. And of course, you can go with hybrid as well. I've also included, I will share this with the group, some links on the left side that you can start thinking about. So there's a debt repayment calculator and a Google sheet that will help you take inventory of your debt and figuring out which repayment plan is best for you all. And the third step then is to, once you figure that out, is to commit to it and tackle in paying down your debt. And lastly, I have on here, the 5 steps to investing. Investing, it can be overwhelming, especially if it's something that wasn't discussed growing up. And just thinking of all the jargon out there. But I broken the process down into 5 steps. Again, there will be a future workshop that goes more in depth. So this is just a general overview of investing. But the first step is to define your why. What are you investing for and why? And there are many reasons why people invest, right? Most common one is for retirement. At some point, we all want to get to the point where Epi is and we are happily retired. I am excited for that in my life, but there's also other reasons for why you might want to retire, right? If you have children, right? Maybe you at some point would like them to go to college, so investing for their college education. If you want to buy a house, there's also that reason too. And that will also allow you to get clear on how much time you have. So that relates to number 2. Once you've defined like what are you investing for and why and how much time do you have, number 2 is then to determine your risk tolerance. So your risk tolerance really is an investor's willingness to risk their investments. Really, I like to just simplify it. It's like, how wild are you trying to get with your investments? Are you more on the conservative side? Are you in the middle? Are you aggressive? All of this is really crucial in determining the types of investments you might buy. So there are a lot out there. Again, you will get more of an extensive workshop that goes more in depth in this. So then the third step is to open a brokerage account. So a brokerage account really is an account where you can invest, you can buy and sell different kinds of securities. So stocks, bonds, crypto, and there are different types of brokerage accounts. I won't go over them, but just know a brokerage account is what you will need if you want to invest. The 4th step then is to fund the account. I think this one is overlooked. Sometimes I think people think that, oh, once I open my brokerage account and I put money in it, I've invested. No, you do have to fund the account. And you can do this by linking your checking account, your savings, whatever it is, so that you can put money into your brokerage account. And that goes into step number 5. Investing is the act of taking the funds that are in your account and using it to buy your investments. And what those investments will look like relates to whatever your risk tolerance is. So again, if you're more on the conservative side, you might be more inclined to buying investments that have low risk. But if you're more on the aggressive side, then you might buy investments that have high potential, higher risk, but they might yield higher returns. So that is all I have for you for today. I think I did good on time. But if you would like to connect with me, you can send me an email, yeslin.alonso@gmail.com. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Yeslin Alonso. But we will have questions now for any of you that might have any questions or maybe comments. This is your floor now. Yes, Paula.
I'll ask one to break the ice, and then everyone else can avalanche after me. I never know like what the recommendation is, because I know like a lot of us graduate with student debt, right? So we have that. We start getting a paycheck, you want to pay off your debt, but you also want to build your emergency savings, but you also need to maybe put something in whatever retirement thing your work gives you. What's sort of the recommended prioritization? Like if you're, just kind of getting the start on this, where should you start your focus?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paula. I would say that all boils down to what your financial goals are, right? So if you really, really want to pay down your debt, then that's probably where you're going to put the most focus on. I will say, though, that it is doable and again, it depends on a person's income stability and what their life situation looks like right now. But I think a common misconception is that if people have debt, then I don't have enough time or I don't have enough money to invest. And I just think that's inaccurate. It is possible to, invest, even if it's just $10 or $5, and still be able to tackle the debt that you have, and also putting some aside to savings. So it is doable, but again, it all boils down to what your financial goals are. If you are someone that, is accepting, I don't know if that's the correct word, but first of all, there's a bunch of different plans out there for tackling student loan debt, right? You can choose a standard repayment plan, but there are also variations of the income-based plan. If you know that right now your goal is, say, for example, I want to focus more on building my savings, but still pay down debt, then an income-based repayment plan would be the best option. Because, and again, that's just depending on how much debt you have. Again, it really, I would just say, just to summarize, it comes down to your goals, what they are, and how you are willing to prioritize them. So I hope that answered your question. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Yasmin, do you want to offer the group your views on your employer or an employer's matching contributions towards retirement accounts? Do you want to match that fully, go at it 50%? What are your views on that?
Yeah, great question. I will say that if you are lucky to be with an employer that matches your 401k or 403b, whatever it is, the retirement plan that they're offering, I would try to match it, just because that's free money that the employer is giving you. There are different ways and how you can invest. And I actually had a slide for this, but I took it out because I was afraid I would run over time. But yes, if your employer offers a match, that is free money. So even if it's just 2%, try to match that 2%, try to contribute to your employer sponsored retirement. And then you can move on to the different accounts that you might have, brokerage accounts. So again, there's brokerage accounts that are related to retirement. There's brokerage accounts related to children or minors. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. But if they offer a match, try to match it. For me, unfortunately, they don't. So I don't really prioritize that account. I still contribute to my 403B, but I put more emphasis on my Roth IRA.
Thank you.
Yasleen, I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's really important that we talk about the feelings behind budgeting and money, because I think that's why people avoid even going into it. So just thank you for addressing that important topic. I just want to know if you have any like podcasts or Instagram things that like are really helpful in terms of kind of breaking into learning more about what we can do with our budgeting or whatever else.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel, for your comment. I'm glad that you found this presentation really helpful because, again, it's not something that we as a community might have grown up and gotten accustomed to actually having these money conversations and unpacking the origin of why we have these beliefs or attitudes towards money. But I do have some podcast recommendations. Yo Quiero Dinero is one of my personal favorites. You can find her on Spotify, but she interviews different BIPOC financial educators and content creators. And I've learned a lot through her. There is also, I'll put a recommendation, and Gabriel, you know her, Sarah Potter Gittleson. She has her own account for Set Finance. I also like to follow Investing Latina at Investing Latina. She was the first person, I would say, where I was able to really understand investing. Another podcast, there's many out there and I'm blanking out, but definitely Yo Quiero Dinero. I like her. She interviews a bunch of different people and you get to learn. She had one the other day about estate planning. I don't know much about that, but I know I should be thinking about it. So yes, I would go check her out.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments?
I dropped a question into the chat for the folks that are on. Since we do have a few more finance focused sessions, if you have anything specific you would like those sessions to cover, please do let us know so we can make sure to incorporate that.
Sensing silence, I think we can go ahead. Oh, perfect. There's a question for you, Yasleen, in the chat.
Yes. So can you explain more about a Roth IRA versus a 401k, for instance? Yes. So to give a general overview of this and a preview of what's to come for future workshops, a 401k, they're both retirement accounts, but a 401k is an employer-sponsored account. So this is typically for employers that are not for profit. And like I was sharing earlier, you can match them if they offer that. Not all of them do, but they can. A Roth IRA, on the other hand, is a type of individual retirement account. So you can open it yourself with different financial institutions. So some really common ones are Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, and there's a bunch out there, but those are the three common ones and really great ones. There are eligibility requirements for a Roth IRA. So you do have to have earned income in order to contribute to a Roth IRA. And depending on your age, there is a limit to it. So I believe if you are under 50, you can contribute up to $6,000 into that account. But if you're over, then you can contribute an additional $1,000. And again, you fund the account and you get to decide what it is that you want to buy. 401ks, they're a little bit limited in the options available to you. But with the Roth IRA, you might have more options than your employer sponsors, but both offer tax benefits. So hopefully that gave you a better idea of the two. Any other questions? We have 2 more minutes. Great. All right. Well, I will, Sonia, would you recommend for someone to seek a financial advisor? I would say it really depends on your situation and how it looks like. If you're someone who's starting out, or maybe you already have some knowledge of these concepts, there is a lot of free content out there where you can learn yourself, but I would say, like, if you've gotten to a point where maybe you know enough, but you're still questioning it, then maybe that's the point where you can seek a financial advisor. And there are different qualifications that you might look to, right? Maybe you want to get a financial advisor that understands your experiences and your background. There's actually a really great site. I forgot the name of it, but I'll email it to Paola so that she could share with you all. But basically what it is, it's a free network of financial advisors who volunteer their time and provide you free advice. So I'll need to look at it, but I've used them before and I've asked them my questions and they've helped me tailor my own financial plan. So I'll reach out to Paola for that information. Yes, so I will share my slides. The links are on there, so I'll send it out to Paola as well, and my slides so that you can use them for future resource.
Thank you so much to everybody that participated. Thank you to Yasleen for agreeing to do this with us. This is the first session of many that we hope to do. The next ones will focus on managing debt, saving in retirement, and investing. We wanted to make sure that those had their own time so that we didn't rush through these things. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you so much to the UCSB Alumni Association as well for helping us sponsor this event. We want to make sure that this is something that is available to folks. And so really grateful that UCSB is able to help us pay for these things, right? Because we want to make sure that our presenters also get paid. And so thank you so much for that. The last thing I wanted to do was just share our Facebook account, our IG account, and our upcoming All Gaucho reunion event. So if any of you are planning to make the trek back out to UCSB, All Gaucho reunion is happening from April the 29th through May 1st, and we will actually be hosting something at El Centro. It's going to be a brunch time mixer where we will also talk more about what we're trying to do, but also connect you all and anybody there to the Chicano Studies Institute to learn a little bit more about what it means for UCSB to be a Hispanic serving institution, what is happening to support Chicano Latinx students at UCSB. And so we're really excited to be able to host this again on campus. It's been 2 years since we've returned, and so very, very excited that we can do this. And so event information is there. And I think that's it. Anything that I missed, Paola?
I don't think so. We'll send a thank you email with all of the resources that Yasleen shared today as a follow-up, so you'll get all of the links that were shared today. And with that, 7:02, thank you all very much for participating. Have a good rest of your night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you all for coming out.
Great job, everyone.